And obviously in the past you've seen, I don't know if there's negativity or anything, but just from a coverage perspective, but you guys have been great from a coverage perspective. Positive, professional, easy to deal with. We appreciate everything that you have done, and I appreciate media probably more than most coaches do. I don't pay attention probably, but I certainly appreciate the relationships and the coverage and consistent support. Obviously, not that you're necessarily cheering for us, but hopefully you are. In saying that, I think we've had a good summer, had a good fall. We have a long ways to go, consistent with every single season that we've ever played. And we have had a great practice on either Monday or Tuesday. Had a terrible practice yesterday. We kind of turned it around a little bit. I think we're gonna have a great one today, which will be awesome. So it's kind of the ebbs and flows of preseason. What we really try to focus on is trying to consistently improve, trying to focus on that process piece, trying to, if we have a successful day, not focusing on that necessarily, but making sure that the next one is just a little bit better. So we're competing, we're fighting. Hopefully you'll see that today, at the practice for a little bit, and then hopefully you'll see it once we play Robert Morris. I believe it's on the 4th. So I'll open it up to questions.
David Eichel, HawkeyeInsider.com. Ben, when it comes to Alvaro, we didn't get the chance to really see him this summer. I guess, how would you say he's progressed within your system? And I guess, what do you kind of envision his role? Stretch 4, playing the 5, or just kind of give us a look into Alvaro?
Yeah, so, it's a unique situation when you come into our program. We demand a lot of effort. We demand a lot of different things, and he can give that. I think before we start to put a great deal of emphasis on just the teaching of the X's and O's, which we still do, we need to make sure that guys are meeting the standard which he currently is. It does take a little while with even transfers or high school kids to acclimate to the type of intensity that we want to play with. And we won't move on from that until we get that. So with him specifically, he is getting himself there. He has, a lot like with other really successful players, he can get himself to a high level of intensity very, very quickly, and he can do it for a minute. Can we get that to 2 minutes? Can we get that to 3 minutes? Can we get that to 4? And can we keep that consistent? Because his high end is high end. How we'll use him, he can play anywhere from the 3, 4, and 5, depending upon if we want to go big or if we want to play small, because of his ability to pass and his ability to stretch the floor with his shot, and then his just overall basketball IQ. So again, we probably haven't at this point used him to the level that we need to use him in practice, just because we needed to get that other stuff going first. And not because he wasn't playing hard. It's just a matter of, can we get to that standard consistently? And now we can approach it with a little bit more, okay, we put you in a position to be a passer. Okay, we put you in a position to be a pick and pop. Now they create rotations, and now he becomes a passer again because of the stress that you put on the defense. Or maybe he posts a smaller matchup if he's at the 3. There's just so many different things you can do with a guy like him.
Hey, Ben. Elliot Clough, Hawkeye Insider. Speaking of Alvaro in the front court, maybe other than Trevin, you don't have a ton of size up front. I guess, what's your expectation in terms of how you protect the rim, or does it change? Does it change your offensive philosophy, maybe like it did last year when Cam was your center? Mm-hmm. How do you plan to protect the rim?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I'm open to suggestions if you've got I think the big thing for us is we have to be a little bit unique in that it's more of a kind of keep it out of the paint type of thing. Keep it out of that 15-foot, keep it out of that 18-foot area, so that it just doesn't get there, so that you don't have to necessarily protect the rim. So you kind of protect the paint rather than protecting the rim and shot blocking. That's why we have bigger bodies on the perimeter, because we can get a 6'4" point guard, but it's really difficult to get a 7-foot guy that can protect the rim and play. Similar to just, one, it costs a lot of money. Two, we had to retool the entire roster. And so, you still have to get guys that can play in the Big Ten, not necessarily specific to what you want. But if we can keep it out of the paint consistently, if we can avoid as many rotations as possible, even at the Division II level and Division I, we didn't have a great deal of shot blocking, and so we've always had that. I don't know if it's a problem, and we're able to find ways to be able to defend and keep it out of the paint.
Chad Leistico, Des Moines Register. What type of identity does this team need to have for it to be able to compete in the Big Ten Conference?
They need to have a chip on their shoulder. You need to play with a little edge. I think that when you take over a position, there's naturally a great deal of excitement. And I think if you're not careful, it can create a sense of arrival. And I said this at the Big Ten meetings. And so understanding that I've always worked better with the chip on my shoulder, like either doubted or whatever. And same with those guys. And so making sure that we continue to have that edge and don't have a sense of arrival, more so than anybody in the league. That's what we're going to need to have to be able to be successful in the Big Ten.
Tyler Tashman with the Des Moines Register. Is Tavion going to be suspended? And just curious how you're dealing with that from a disciplinary standpoint.
Yeah, so we'll initially follow the school code of conduct, and then after that, then we'll have some team rules in regards to whether or not there will be a suspension. Haven't necessarily made a decision in regards to that stuff until I completely get the information. With discipline issues, just kind of for future reference, the way we've always done it is, and the way I've always done it is, I've always tried to take each case a little bit differently than the last, because there's so many circumstances surrounding each thing. And I think oftentimes coaches have, if he does this, then this happens to that kid, but all circumstances are different. Maybe if somebody else does this, it's worse, or maybe it's less, or whatever that may be. Guys that have like these specific things in mind, a lot of times are scared to make the decision when it actually happens. And so now it's up to me to make the decision based on our team rules. Obviously, he's disappointed and we are too. The good part is he's going to learn from this and he's going to grow from it, and that's my job as a coach, is to teach kids how to grow and be better in those specific situations.
Mike Halas, Gazette. Back to Alvaro, and because we haven't really gotten to know him as well as the other players yet, but what made Iowa and your program and the school a fit for him when he obviously had some impressive callers?
Mm-hmm. The people, I think our coaching staff got around him, and he loved our coaching staff. He loved the connection. He loved the genuineness. When we have recruiting, we do a good job with our visits. And he described it as it's not a commercial. And so it feels very real because it is. It's a very genuine visit. And I think guys that end up choosing us over other schools really value that genuine connection and what they're going to receive once they get here, even though it's not necessary for everybody, because it is a tough program. And to be able to win at the level we want to win at eventually, we need guys that are here for the right reasons, and that's why he chose that.
If I could follow up, what kind of season did he have at Robert Morris last year? We can see the numbers, but I'm sure you've seen more than that.
Yeah, I think the year before they were at the bottom of the league, and then he was the one returner, and they completely flipped everything, and then he was MVP of the league. I think it kind of goes with the theme of what we try to recruit is either undervalued or underappreciated, if that makes sense. And then with him, he triggered everything because he was a stretch 5 in that league. And so he could stretch the floor, he could pass, he could rebound, he could defend. He got a lot of deflections, and probably most importantly, he's fiercely competitive, almost to a fault. That's probably his greatest strength, and it's also his probably greatest weakness, is that he's he's got some Spanish flair, and he's got some flair to his game, which I love and appreciate. So, but we just got to harness it and hone it in, and we're getting there.
Hey, Coach. Corey Brada from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Can you talk a little bit about Peyton and the process that went into his decision to play for you, and the challenges that presents for a young man playing for his dad? I know he's dealt with some of that, I'm sure, at the high school level, just having his dad be Ben McCollum. And then what is his role? What do you expect him to actually contribute to this program, this team this year?
Yeah, the first part, so he was recruited, and initially our whole deal was that he wasn't going to play for me. That was always kind of the thing. He did get recruited, mostly low major stuff. He didn't post him because it's just not my style, and it's not his. And so, but then naturally it also hurt his recruitment. I think his junior year he was being recruited when I was at Division II, and then we got Drake, and then all of a sudden some of those schools that were calling didn't call anymore, specific to just because they assumed that he was going to play for me. But it's like, no, he's not going to. Well, then he was going to play at Drake, and then obviously I got this job. So at that point it became pretty late. It's fun. It is. I think that probably the hardest thing for him is I've always found like there's two types of parents. There's the parents that their kid can do no wrong, and then there's sometimes the parents that their kid can do no right. Sometimes I probably trend on the second of those two, and so probably my staff is a little more on the left side, if that makes sense. He's been great in practice, honestly, above. I expected him to play at some point. He's even above where I thought he was, just because he's so good defensively, and he understands that there always is going to be like a lead guard, and that was the hardest position for us to recruit, was somebody to play with Bennett, because people just, thought Bennett was going to have the ball too much or whatever, and so now you have that position that, not necessarily this year, but into the future, where you've got a guy that'll defend, you got a guy that'll compete. He was voted our hardest worker in the preseason, all those different things. So it's been fun. When I see him at practice, though, I don't. It's your son, but you don't like treat it like that. I think that would be unfair to him both ways. After the fact, it's kind of nice, and I think my wife's really jealous, because she's like, well, I used to see him all the time, and you didn't get to see him, and now you get to see him every day. I said, yeah, but it's a little different in practice because I'm not as nice there.
Madison Hurtzik, The Gazette. I wanted to ask, with the players that followed you from Drake to here, how have you kind of used them as ways to be a leader and help introduce some of the new transfer players that haven't worked with you one-on-one in season before, to get them accustomed to the culture, and then also to help instill a lot of the things that you want to build around this program? Yeah,
that's been probably the trickiest thing, is when we came to Drake. And I know everybody wants to compare the two, and so I'll just do it anyway. When we came to Drake and we brought 4 players, 3 of those players, 2 of them had played for me for 5 years. That was their 5th year. 1 of them for 6. So they coached the team, essentially, right? And I felt like I did a good job of coaching. But they were able to really instill that. We have 1 that was with me for 4 years, and then we have a bunch that were there for 1 year, that were led by 3 others, and then Bennett obviously as well. And so they've taught them some of the effort that needs to happen. I want to challenge them to coach more, to coach the team a little bit more from that effort, from that toughness standpoint, from, hey, you need to be here, you need to be there, rather than, like we had a great leader last year named Daniel Abreu. Daniel Abreu would just boom, 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 he'd organize everything. It's like, well, he's not walking through the doors here, right? And so we need somebody else to step up and be a leader in those. But as far as like understanding me, understanding all that stuff, they've done a great job as far as that goes.
Hey, Ben, Elliot Clough, Hawkeye Insider again. Wanted to ask about the 25 class between Trevin, Tate, and now Trey, who reclassified. Is your expectations that they play soon? Is it like something that they come along throughout the season? What are your expectations for them?
Yeah, they're pretty good. Like, that class is pretty good. We're pretty excited about them. I think we've got some steals in that class, if you will. Trevin, obviously 6'11", can do so many different things. Tate, 6'7", can shoot, can finish. Whether or not they play, the hopes are that eventually they can, this season. If not all of them, a couple of them. I think when you bring freshmen into the fold, you have to be a little bit careful, because if you just throw them out there, you can throw them out there in scrimmages and they're going to make 10,000 mistakes, and then you can just kind of let them play through the mistake. But in a game, they're not going to really be allowed to play through that mistake, if that makes sense. And if you pull them quickly, you're going to shatter their confidence, because you got to allow freshmen to play through mistakes, in my mind. And so once they get to a point where we feel like, okay, these guys are ready, and if they make one mistake, we're not going to yank them, then that's probably the time that they'll stay in the game consistently. But all three of them have been fantastic, and even better than we expected.
Ben, Colin Davies, KCRG. What is the biggest difference that you've noticed? You had that one off season as Drake, and now you had this whole summer and fall to get ready. What is the biggest difference here at Iowa that you're seeing from other years in your career in the preparation to the season?
Like just the preparation itself? I think anytime you move up levels, there's more distractions. It's probably what it is. Not for me necessarily. It doesn't really distract me a whole lot. But as far as like the players themselves, because it's difficult to hide from it. And so you have to understand, what it actually is, and do I value somebody's opinion in regards to this? Because, there's still 18 to 22, 23-year-olds that are fairly sensitive to things. And so that would probably be the biggest difference. And expectations. I think that there's a natural expectation that you're just going to go win the Big Ten, and it's just going to show up, because that's what we did at Missouri Valley, at the Missouri Valley Conference. And so I'm not saying we're not going to compete, and I'm not saying we're not going to be there or be good, but it is hard to be good, and that's where I think sometimes when you have those distractions, sometimes maybe your guys don't understand, like, no, it's actually supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be a struggle. And that's the cool part about being able to win championships. It's not the actual championship itself. That's great, but it's the struggle and the fight to be able to get to that level. And so you have to avoid some of those distractions to be able to do that.
Hey, Coach. Shannon Earhart, KCCI, all the way back here. Who's impressed you the most?
I would say at this point, Trevin. Trevin's been great. He's really gotten himself into shape. He can really, really pass it. The game slows down for him. He can shoot. Yesterday, I think he was 2 for 2 or 3 for 3 from three. Just does a lot of good things. Great attitude. That's probably even one of the more overwhelming things that I didn't expect. Guys are winners. They're naturally going to win. But his attitude is through the roof. And so he's been great in the preseason.
Time for a few more, Coach. We'll go 4 more. David Eichel, HawkeyesInsider.com. Ben, when it comes to like the psychological aspect of coaching players, some guys respond by, getting yelled at, screaming in their face. Other guys will kind of go back in a shell if they do that. I guess, how long does it take for you to kind of realize how to individually coach your players? And do you try to recruit guys with the same attitude to minimize that part of it? Or I guess, again, how long would it take you to kind of really understand how to coach certain guys and certain teams?
Yeah, it doesn't take long to figure out a personality. Whether it's, I think that's something that as a coach you naturally have to study. I had a stepfather that was a narcotics officer, so he would investigate me every second, and then I've got a mom that's a judge, so I probably come by it just by them, because he just makes quick reads and he kind of figures it out, and my mom was very similar in respect to that. I think how long it takes to get out of them what you want out of them based on how you coach them is the tricky part, because some people aren't going to develop as quickly as others, and some teams aren't going to develop as quickly as others. And so, some need to solution find, for themselves, and then some need a little bit more structure. And so everybody is pretty unique. I think the big thing, the way my style is I'm fairly intense. And so I need to make sure that I'm careful in regards to that I don't necessarily use a ton of fear, but still add the intensity to it. And so what I mean by that is you try to tell guys what to do rather than what not to do. And so if you can consistently, hey, we'd like you to do this rather than don't take that shot, a lot of times it eliminates those weaknesses, but it takes more time to do it that way. Fear coaches probably get a little bit more results early in the season. And then late in the season, those same fear coaches, you'll see those are the teams that finished 2-8. And we'd like to finish 8-2. So that's our style. Well, I shouldn't say 2. I don't like to say 2. What's 2 are you going to lose? That's dumb. That was dumb.
Hey, Kevin Lehman, ESPN. Coach, I understand that you had an outside scrimmage with another team. What were the positives that came out of that, and what areas did you feel you need to work on?
You know, the positives are we got a lot of guys in. You know, we were able to see guys in different environments to a really well-coached team who I've played in the past when he was at Lincoln Memorial. And, you know, that's the positives. We don't necessarily scout our scrimmages, and that's kind of been a historical thing. I can remember my first season at Northwest. We played a school, and you would know, played a school in Mid-America Nazarene, and they were one of the best NAIA teams in the country. Every year they were 35 wins and would go to championships and win championships. And I was like, okay, let's schedule these guys. And we went down there, and I think we beat them by 35, 40, something like, which, you know, Division II, which again, I know you are aware of, but, you know, a good NAIA team should generally beat an average Division II team pretty consistently. And we beat them by like 35. I'm like, man, we're going to be pretty good. We ended up 12-15 that season. And so when I talk about like the fear coach perspective or certain things, with those scrimmages, then we kind of adjusted the way we do it is for that specifically to the first scrimmages, we don't scout. We kind of allow our guys to solution find. We kind of allow them to suffer and see if they can work through some problems. So those scrimmages don't usually feel good. The difference is now we're at the Division I level where people pay attention to your closed scrimmages. Whereas in the past, if they paid attention to the scrimmage versus William Jewell College when we got beat by 15 and then went 38-0, you realize it's kind of a consistent theme in our program. So I don't know that we read into it as much as what we did achieve from it is we need to work against switching. We need to work against a press. We need to, when runs go against us, we need to be able to function on the floor together and not need a timeout because in a loud environment, we're going to need those things. And then, you know, there's a few guys that probably made their way into the lineup late in the scrimmage where, you know, it was the last couple segments where they played great. So we're pretty excited about that part of it.
Tyler Tashman with the Des Moines Register. You mentioned it's difficult to be good in the Big Ten and expectations that maybe come with that. What are your expectations for your first season here? And I know it might not necessarily be black and white answer, but just what are your expectations of what you want to do in year one?
You know what I think the biggest thing that I want to do is one, make, you know, the state of Iowa and the University of Iowa proud of the kids that we coach and proud of the toughness that they show and the communication and the connectivity that they show. And then two, bring everybody with us in regards to that. And so I think a lot of times when you have consistently successful programs, it's not just the coaches, it's not just the players, it's the community. It's the students, it's the state of Iowa, it's anyone that's a Hawkeye fan that rallies and understands, hey, this is going to be hard, and we want you a part of that, and we want to build it into something, you know, special where it can sustain success. And so those two expectations for me is what I'm searching for. So we've talked about how we get out in the community. We want to serve and give to the community as much as and to you guys, so that, you know, either it's reciprocated or it's not, because either way we plan to have some success. but it's a lot easier when everybody's driving forward and everybody's like, man, let's go, let's do this thing, and let's fight together. And hopefully we've got a community that'll do that. We got fans that'll do that, and then I know we have players that'll do that.
Final question, Coach. Scott. Hi, Scott Docterman with The Athletic. I wanted to ask you about, from no matter where you've coached, your efficiency has remained high in recent years, but the tempo has changed depending on the personnel around you, whether it's faster at Northwest Missouri State or you slowed it down a little bit, probably based on the personnel last year. Where do you anticipate going this year with your current lineup, and how does Bennett Sturts play into that, because he's been able to kind of dictate the tempo at pretty much every location he's been?
Yeah, and he'll still dictate the tempo. So a lot of times we play as fast as our point guard wants to play, to be perfectly honest. And last year we wanted to play a little bit faster, but obviously couldn't get a shot, which you're well aware of. Specific to this year, kind of probably depends on the lineup. We can play a lineup where we have 5 shooters at a time and still be big. You know, if you go, a Bennett, a Brendan, a Cooper Koch, and Alvaro, a Trevin. You know, just arbitrary names. I'm not saying that's, but those guys all shoot. And so now you play 5 shooters, but then maybe you play a lineup where people can shoot, but they're not like shooters. And so maybe your tempo slows simply because you just can't get a shot at the rim. I will say this, our defense dictates a little bit of that tempo, meaning it takes a while to get a quality shot against us. If you have a team that's actually patient and doesn't take early average, that dictates some of that pace. We will try to score in transition as much as we can. We don't probably want to get into being Alabama that's going like this. I will say that. So that probably isn't going to happen. Maybe it'll happen in my tenure if we get, freaky athletes and the Big Ten speeds up. But we'll play to whatever wins the game. So if a team plays fast and we need to play slow to change it, then we'll do that. If a team plays slow and we need to play fast, then we'll do that. Whatever it is to win the game, but we're going to be efficient. That's what we need to make sure that we are consistently, so that we can set our defense so that you won't score as many points. Take good shots. You're efficient. The ball goes through the basket more. You can sprint back easier. You set your defense. Your half-court defense gets a stop. If you get the stop on defense, now your offense is better because you're playing in transition offensively. Ball goes through the basket more, and then you come back. So it all kind of works together based on your personnel. Not to go into too much. If you guys want to talk basketball, we can do this all day. But
All right, thank you, Coach.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
All right, guys, players will be down on the playing court.
We'll have your coaches claim. Thank you.